regardless of what our district attorney, Henry Wade, turns up here in Dallas County, that the Senate committee should look into this matter because there are accusations and allegations of irregularities throughout the length and breadth of Texas. I've heard them myself. Other members of the legislature have called me and told me of what they consider to be wrongdoing in their particular area. So it's not a problem that is confined to Dallas County. I think it's statewide in its scope.
With these events, do you think perhaps additional liquor legislation is needed and some new liquor laws might come into effect next term?
Well, I don't think there's any question that we need to revise the present liquor laws of Texas. They're over 30 years old. They haven't been amended. They're archaic. In many cases, the liquor law is ambiguous, and we in the legislature have a duty and a responsibility to clarify those laws so that the law enforcement people will be able to properly administer the law and to enforce it fairly and impartially.
I think that ought to be handled on a local level if possible. I have all the confidence in the world in my brother Henry Wade conducting a thorough investigation, and which he's in the process of doing now, incidentally. If necessary, I think if he thinks so, we ought to call a court of inquiry before a district judge and have all the power of subpoena to any of the state officials to come to Dallas to testify under oath on any subject in the presence of the press and the public.
Why do you think it should be handled on a local level when it is a state agency involved?
Well, the only thing that we have any proof of has happened, that to my knowledge, has happened in Dallas County. Now, it may be there's rumors of some problems in other counties and other areas, but to my knowledge, they haven't been proved. Now, if the Court of Inquiry should bring out the fact that it is a statewide problem, I would suggest that perhaps the governor appoint a blue ribbon citizens committee.
By now, you have probably already received your annual mail from this office. This is the office of the District Director of the Internal Revenue Service. Specifically, this is the taxpayer contact section where thousands of questions are already pouring in by mail, by phone, or the taxpayer actually coming in to ask a question. There are a few changes over last year in regard to your income tax. District Director Ellis Campbell fills us in.
Well, Sam, there's not too many changes. If all of our taxpayers would look at their instructions that came with their tax return, while they would find a few. For instance, they have expanded educational deduction. There's a change in medical deduction by reason of Medicare having come on the scene. And there's a change in the tax form that they probably won't notice, but we had trouble last year in that the numbers of the lines were on the left-hand side of the return, and when they draw down the figures, they put it on the wrong line on the right-hand side of the return. And this year, the number is brought closer to where your amounts are put on the return. That'll help. And then there's one thing we've been getting some questions on. Lots of people have an idea that Social Security tax has increased. It hasn't increased, but there has been a change in the maximum amount.
Mr. Campbell, are there a lot of people who call or write you and ask rather simple questions that they could easily read in the instructions you send them?
Most of the things that we get by telephone and in our contact unit are really simple questions. If they'd take the instructions and look through it, they probably wouldn't have to ask anybody any questions.
A lot of people gripe that the instructions you send them are too complicated. Can you make them any simpler than they are?
Well, I don't see how we could simplify them any more than they are. Really, it's something about an income tax return I think it scares people. And rather than read it, they'd rather ask somebody else about it, and too often that's a bad thing to do, because the next fella giving them an answer wouldn't be the situation in their case, So the best thing to do is read the instructions and apply it to their own income.
If you have a question, ask the IRS. Phone, write, or come by to ask your question. But the Internal Revenue Service says, please read your instruction book before coming by. It'll help them. This is Sam Curry reporting for Channel 8 News.
Well, very frankly, I think this is the only way we can do it. Last year, my president's address at our national convention was titled Geministic Bifurcation. This is a new concept. You know, Gemini means to double, bifurcate means to cut in half. I'm convinced that we must cut in half our waste, and if we did, we would have twice as much. And this is the way we're going to have to feed the exploding population.
In essence, then, what you're saying is that we're killing ourselves with every bite we eat.
I'll agree that a lot of people are. Now, of course, there are a lot of people who do not, most people, I'd say, and this may sound like an extreme statement, but it's really not. Most people do not get enough high-quality food to have good health. This is what it's all about. Malnutrition is rampant in this country. There's no doubt about it.
Bill, where do you get your material for this type of humor?
Well, usually it comes from out of my brain while I'm talking. See, I talk and I listen to myself. So that means I'm not crazy, because I am talking to someone, and somebody is listening.
A good, intelligent conversation, then.
Well, usually it is intelligent, you know, because I understand myself, you see. But I just kind of accept and reject whatever I think is funny and is not funny. But a large part of it depends upon the audience's reaction, too. Because I may think that something's funny and they may not get it. So what I do is I try and figure out, if I still think it's funny, what I'm doing wrong, you know, so that they are not getting the picture. Then when I figure out what I'm doing wrong, I go back and I try it again, and usually I've painted the picture pretty well then.